What's going on there, YouTube? And welcome back to another comic book video. This is the channel where we sit down and cover different comic book stories from different comic book companies. Today we're going to jump back over to Marvel Comics, and we are going to continue our coverage over the Origin of Hobgoblin. This was the second Goblin that Spider-Man had to fight in the 1980s. He was so popular because fans want to know, who is this new Hobgoblin? And Marvel kept it going for years before they finally told us who was the original Hobgoblin. Now, unfortunately, Marvel did make a huge mess with this, and you'll see what I mean as we go through the different videos over the next couple days. But in this video, we're going to see the secret origin of Mary Jane, but also the next plan for Hobgoblin as well. So if you do like today's comic book video, hit that like button down below and subscribe. But here we go. So to begin today's video, we pick up with Amazing Spider-Man number 259. Now, to a lot of fans out there, they know this issue as the secret origin of Mary Jane, because before this book, we really did not have any information about Mary Jane. We had a few things, but not a lot about her past. And so with this book right here, it's telling us the actual origin of Mary Jane. At the same time, there was a previous issue where Mary Jane did tell Peter Parker that she knew he was Spider-Man. Now, getting into this book, it really opens up with them kind of confirming that Mary Jane does know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and he's wondering what could happen to her with her having that knowledge of him being Spider-Man. But she dives right into her origin story, really starting off with her mom and her dad. And we learned that when it came to Mary Jane parents, they met in college and they got married very quickly. And that led to the path of the marriage falling apart, really, because you then had Mary Jane's father trying to advance farther in his career, but her mother kind of gave up her career, especially when they got pregnant with Mary Jane's sister and later on Mary Jane as well. By the way, her sister name is Gail. I hope I said her name correctly. But you do have the story kind of continue on with the idea that Mary Jane's father was really verbally and physically abusive. At first, it was just to his wife, Mary Jane's mother, but later on, it did turn physical towards the daughters as well. And so you had Mary Jane's mom say, we have to leave. And they did leave to get away from the man who was becoming abusive. Now, with the next section of this book, we do get reminded that, hey, Hobgoblin is still out there causing problems, because we do see Hobgoblin go out and attack a random train. Yes, an actual train. And the reason why, because there's a guy named Hudson who is running a gambling site on this train illegally. And so with that happening, it is Hobgoblin saying, listen, your gambling business is amazing. Good job. But now I want 10% of your profit. This is Hobgoblin kind of making money on the side, but also hurting Kingpin at the same time, because Hudson is already giving money over to Kingpin as well. So now he's going to lose more money to both Kingpin and Hobgoblin. And Hobgoblin's like, I don't care. You give me the money I asked for. Now, getting back into the origin of Mary Jane, this is the moment we see that Mary Jane, her sister, and her mother all move in with Frank Brown, who is this cousin to Mary Jane's mother. But yes, Frank Brown is better than Mary Jane's father. It's just that he is very strict, but he did take care of the ladies. Now, this begins the repeat of what happened to Mary Jane's mother with Gail, Mary Jane's sister. What I mean by that is Gail is in high school. She's doing great in high school. So is Mary Jane, but Gail finds someone that she begins to love, which is Tim. And she begins to give up all her life goals to be with Tim, just like what her mother did earlier. And so with that being said, you have Gail telling her mother and Mary Jane and Frank Brown that she's going to marry Tim. And for her mother, she's like, no, you need to go to college, finish college, graduate, finish your dreams, and then marry. But for Gail, she's like, no, I want to be with Tim, which does lead into a problem because Tim is all in love with Gail until Gail gets pregnant. And when Gail gets pregnant and they have a kid, Tim begins to kind of become distant from Gail. And so once again, we're repeating the life cycle of Mary Jane's family. These ladies find someone they care for, but then they begin the process of losing that man through not abusing them, but getting abused by them or being pushed to the side because life is too much for one guy. Getting back over to Hobgoblin, we see Hobgoblin is continuing to attack different businesses that could be illegally making money or working with the kingpin as well. And so this is Hobgoblin going to this next business, breaking into the place, causing all the havoc in the world, but to grab the main boss and say, listen, you are going to start giving me money as well. 10% of your profit, like the last guy. And you have no choice here. It's a yes, and that is it. There's no no. And Hobgoblin leaves to continue on with his business. And so we do jump into the origin of Mary Jane one more time, where you have Mary Jane tell Peter Parker that Gail got pregnant once again. Once she got pregnant a second time, her and Tim fell apart. Tim left her behind. And you had Mary Jane's mother go help Gail out, but then Mary Jane's mother got sick and she died. And with her death, now it's just Gail and Mary Jane. And Gail actually expects Mary Jane to stay with her. Like, hey, I need you to stay with me and help me raise these two kids. But for Mary Jane, she's like, no, I'm not going to stay here. For me to have my own life, I need to leave you behind. I've been a punching bag for you and mom for too long. And so you have Mary Jane actually leave her sister behind. And that ends the story of Mary Jane's past. But on top of that, you have Peter Parker feeling so bad for Mary Jane. But he is still wondering what he should do with Mary Jane because she knows that he is Spider-Man. But you have Mary Jane kind of comfort him, kind of like, hey, I'm not going to tell the world that you are Spider-Man. You can trust me. Like I trust you with my information, I'm hoping you can trust me with your secret as well. And these two kind of rebuild that friendship, and they're not getting back together just yet, but it does begin the process. And you will see what I mean as we go through these videos in the next couple of days, because again, it's them realizing maybe we should be together. Now we do get a set of pages where we see some other things going on in the Spider-Man comics at this time. For example, Reed Richards, the leader of the Fantastic Four, is studying the symbiote, letting us know this was the time where Peter Parker did get the Venom symbiote. And at first he thought it was just a regular suit, not knowing it was actually living and trying to take over his body. But anyways, then the next page we see Hobgoblin now has a partner. This partner is a guy known as the Rose. Now, there have been 4 different people who has taken up the mantle of the Rose. This is the first one, and this is the son of Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin. It is Richard Fisk trying to overthrow his father. But anyways, you do have Hobgoblin tell the Rose that they're going to go after Harry Osborn and his wife, Liz Allen. And so to wrap up the first issue that we're covering right now, you have Peter Parker getting back home after seeing Mary Jane and learning her past and realizing he can trust her with his secret of being Spider-Man. He does turn on the news and he overhears how Hobgoblin is back in town. Now at this point in Marvel Comics, Peter Parker has not seen Hobgoblin since our last video, where he fought him and the truck blew up and Peter thought that the Hobgoblin drowned or just, well, caught on fire, I guess, whatever, but thought he died. And so this is Peter Parker realizing, oh my gosh, Hobgoblin is still alive. I need to go out there and finally stop this man. And so you have Peter Parker put on his Spider-Man outfit to go out there and hopefully finally defeat the Hobgoblin. Now, with Amazing Spider-Man number 260, it opens up with Aunt May. And the reason why, because Peter Parker, remember guys, in our last video, Peter Parker quit graduate school. Like, he already finished college technically. He went back to college to go to graduate school. But anyways, he quit that. And Aunt May is upset with him because to her, Peter Parker is giving up on his life goals. And so we see her kind of just in her home, upset, mad at the world. And you have Nathan, her boyfriend at the time, was trying to talk to her and telling her, listen, you're shutting out your nephew. You need to open up to your nephew. He needs you. You're technically his only living relative at this point. So you need to talk to Peter. And so getting over to Spider-Man, we see him go to one of the business owners that Hobgoblin attacked earlier. And this is Spider-Man trying to gather some information on why in the world did Hobgoblin attack this place for? Now we know why, because Hobgoblin is trying to make some money, but for Peter, he has no idea. And so after he beats up some thugs and being able to have a one-on-one conversation with one of the owners that got attacked by Hobgoblin, he finds out that Hobgoblin is trying to make some money, trying to take 10% of profit from this owner. But this owner does tell Peter that no, Hobgoblin does not collect the money himself. He sends somebody else. And that's all what Spider-Man needed to hear, and he leaves. Once Spider-Man leaves, he begins to think about Mary Jane and Black Cat. Remember, Mary Jane and Spider-Man are not together. Spider-Man is dating Black Cat, but he's dating Black Cat as Spider-Man, not Peter Parker. What I mean is, Black Cat has no idea that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And so all she knows is Spider-Man. But their relationship is on the rocks at this point because Black Cat is keeping a secret from Spider-Man, which is that she got some powers through one of his villains, Wilson Fisk, and she knows that it's going to make him very angry. But moving on. This is Spider-Man wondering what to do, but also he's thinking about Harry Osborn, Norman Osborn, because they're the Green Goblin. And he's hoping that he can figure out how to stop this new goblin, the Hobgoblin. The next set of pages is really just Hobgoblin reminding us that he is working with the Rose because he wants to take down Harry Osborn and Liz Allen. And the Rose, after Hobgoblin leaves, talks to one of his men, and the Rose says, listen, we're just using Hobgoblin to reach our own goals, but those goals right now, guys, do not matter for this story. But after that moment, you have Mary Jane meeting up with Harry Osborn and Liz Allen. The reason why, because Liz Allen and Mary Jane are going to have a little girls' time, go on dinner together, while Harry Osborn goes back to the office to take care of some business. Now, this is the moment where you have Hobgoblin attacking Harry Osborn. And the reason why Hobgoblin is attacking Harry Osborn for is because Hobgoblin actually wants more copies of Norman Osborn's journals. That is very important because you have to remember, in our last video, the journals, they got burned up when Hobgoblin and Spider-Man last fought against each other. And so right now, it is Hobgoblin coming to Harry Osborn hoping to get more copies of this journal. But luckily for Harry Osborn, Spider-Man was nearby. And Spider-Man does begin to fight against Hobgoblin. But even though this fight is very cool to see, is Spider-Man fighting against Hobgoblin and he's trying to stop him, their fight does go on for a few pages. A lot of pages to be exact. But this is not the important part of this story, because after Hobgoblin is able to kind of get away from Spider-Man and go on with his plans of trying to hurt Harry Osborn and Liz Allen, we realize he's only going after Harry Osborn right now. What about Liz Allen though? But then you have to remember Liz Allen and Mary Jane went to dinner together, or breakfast, lunch, whatever. But Hobgoblin has some of the men of the Rose go and grab them. and they grab them right when Harry Osborn sees them getting grabbed. And unfortunately for Harry Osborn, he is unable to save his wife and his friend Mary Jane from being kidnapped. But on top of that, you see Harry Osborn's mind begin to slip. And what I mean is, he starts saying things like, I am the son of the Green Goblin. Now, he already knew he was at this point, but it seems that at this point right here, he might go back to his old ways and becoming the Green Goblin once again himself, if he has to save his wife and his friend Mary Jane. Now, with Amazing Spider-Man number 261, we pick up with Liz Allen and Mary Jane realizing that they have been kidnapped by the Hobgoblin. They are confused on why they have been kidnapped for. We know why, since Hobgoblin thinks that Harry Osborn has copies of Norman Osborn Green Goblin journals. So it is Hobgoblin telling the ladies, listen, if Harry Osborn gives me what I want, I will not kill you guys. But if he doesn't, then I will kill you guys. Now remember, Liz Allen is pregnant. We found out in our last video that she is pregnant by Harry Osborn. And so the threat is even bigger now because it is Hobgoblin telling Liz, I will kill you and your unborn child if I don't get what I want. And we get reminded that Hobgoblin is also working with the Rose, the son of Wilson Fisk. And his name again is Richard Fisk. And so we jump over to Harry Osborn and we see him going through his dad things, hoping to find another copy of Norman Osborn's Green Goblin journals to save the life of his wife, his unborn child, and his close friend Mary Jane. But at the same time, it's him kind of slipping. His mind is slowly beginning to slip because remember, Harry Osborn was the Green Goblin. But thanks to some things happening here and there, he forgot that he was the Green Goblin once. He forgot his father was the Green Goblin. But with Hobgoblin coming around, telling Harry, hey, your father was the Green Goblin, it's beginning the process of Harry Osborn possibly slipping. He's slowly slipping back to becoming maybe the Green Goblin once again. But he does find the journals and he does leave in a hurry. But while he is leaving in a hurry, we do see a spider tracer on the back of his car. Now we do get a set of pages where you have Harry Osborn meeting up with Hobgoblin to give over the last copy of Norman Osborn's journal. Now before Harry does that, he tells Hobgoblin he wants to make sure that Liz Allen and Mary Jane are okay. And so you have Hobgoblin knock out Harry, still read the journal, and then take Harry Osborn hostage. We also couldn't find out that Spider-Man used Harry as bait to make sure that Mary Jane and Liz Allen are okay. So Spider-Man is going to follow Hobgoblin back to the base to save all three of his friends from Hobgoblin and the Rose. And this leads into a set of pages where you have Spider-Man follow Hobgoblin back to the base the Rose was using currently in this warehouse where he is holding Mary Jane and Liz Allen. And with that, it does lead into a big fight between Spider-Man and Hobgoblin. Harry Osborn is also able to break out of the prison or the prison cell that the Rose and Hobgoblin put Mary Jane, Liz Allen, and Harry Osborn in. And so you get this section where it's just complete chaos. Not in a bad way, but in a way of saying that this is what happens when you have a man trying to save his wife and his unborn child and his close friend, which is Harry Osborn. At the same time, you have Spider-Man trying to save them and stop Hobgoblin. And you also have Hobgoblin who wants to use Harry Osborn for different reasons, but also kill Spider-Man. And so you have all these different sides trying to do all these different things. There is the Rose, but the Rose is like, listen, things are popping off, so it's time for us to get out of here before more things pop off. But with that being said, these next few pages is just Hobgoblin and Spider-Man fighting. The fire starts again in a warehouse. Another fire in a Hobgoblin story. But with this fire, it's kind of important because Mary Jane, Liz Allen, Harry Osborn, they're trapped in the flames. And so Spider-Man has no choice but to let Hobgoblin go to save his friend. So once again, right when it seems that Spider-Man is about to figure out who is the Hobgoblin, because he has Hobgoblin cornered, he has to let Hobgoblin go because he has to save the life of his friends first. We also come to find out after Spider-Man saved all of his friends, well, Liz Allen, again, she is pregnant. And going through all of that right there made her very sick. And right now it seems that she could lose the baby. And so you have the ambulance pull up to take her away. And Spider-Man and Mary Jane are wondering what is going to happen to Liz Allen and the baby. Now this is a double loss for Hobgoblin. The first loss is losing to Spider-Man because Hobgoblin does have the Goblin formula inside of him to give him the super strength, but he still lost. On top of that, the journal that he got from Harry Osborn, the last copy of Norman Osborn's journals, is just a copy of the journals he had in the past. So when he goes through it, it's showing him locations of hidden rooms in different buildings owned by Oscorp that he already looted. And so the journal is basically useless to Hobgoblin. And with that being said, Hobgoblin is now on his own. He can no longer rely on Norman Osborn tech and gear to make him a powerful goblin. And so with that being said, this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please hit that like button down below and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But I do hope you enjoyed today's comic book video.